Hi folks, this video is a Q&A session featuring Teen Council. So Teen Council is a peer education program through Mount Baker Planned Parenthood, and Teen Council members are trained to provide sex education to their peers. So if you've had health class this year, you've probably met Teen Council. So in this video, they are going to be responding to the questions that folks submitted during Sexual Assault Awareness Month last month. I want to give a really big content warning for this video because the teens and I are going to be answering questions about consent, sexual assault, and rape. And hearing about these topics can bring up past experiences of trauma for people. So I really want to invite you all to take care of yourselves during this video. If you need to put your head down, to check out, or distract yourself during this video, that is totally okay. And if you have experienced sexual assault in the past or know someone who has, I really encourage you to seek help. And we're going to chat a little bit about BHS, which is a resource in Bellingham for folks who have experienced sexual assault. So I really recommend seeking help from BHS. Okay, so this first question is, what exactly defines sexual assault? So sexual assault refers to unwanted sexual contact that occurs without explicit consent from the other person. So this can include things like attempted or completed rape, unwanted fondling or sexual touch, and it can also include forcing another person to perform a sexual act.
Someone asks, what are the different kinds of sexual assault, or the different situations someone can find themselves in? And this is a really great question because it's super important to be able to recognize sexual assault so that you can protect yourself and those you know. Most sexual assault is committed by someone known to the victim, such as a partner or acquaintance, and other times it's committed by a stranger. Some of the different kinds of sexual assault include child sexual abuse, intimate partner violence, incest, and drug-facilitated sexual assault.
So our next question is, what are the statistics for sexual assault cases so we can be informed on how often this sort of thing may happen? So some data/statistics from RAIN state that every 73 seconds an American is sexually assaulted. And 1 out of 6 American women and 1 out of 33 American men have been experienced an attempted or completed rape. And the 2015 U.S. Transgender Survey found that 47% of transgender people are sexually assaulted at some point in their lifetime.
I am going to answer the question, what is the legal age of consent? So in Washington state, the age of consent for sex is 16 years old, which means that at this age, a person can consent to sex with any other adult, regardless of the age difference between them, just as long as the older person is not in a position of power over the younger person, like a teacher or a coach. But teens younger than 16 may also give sexual consent just as long as the partners are close in age. So the law says that if the younger person is under 12 years old, the older person must be within 24 months older, which is 2 years. If the younger person is 12 or 13, the older person must be within 36 months older, which is 3 years. If the younger person is 14 or 15, the older person must be within 48 months older, which is 4 years. And if the age difference is too large, then consent cannot be given legally.
Our next question is, how can I help somebody who's been impacted by sexual assault? And we know that it's not always easy to show support for somebody who's experienced a sexual assault, so here are a few ways that we would recommend doing that. A big one is just listening and being there for them, telling them that you believe them and that you know that it's not their fault, and recognizing the courage that it may take for them to come forward. Also, being patient, because recovering from trauma can and often does take time. And another important one is encouraging them to get the support they need, and this can mean connecting them with a resource. A great local one is domestic violence and sexual assault services.
So another question, how do I deal with someone close to me being assaulted in their past who never speaks about it, only the other abuse they endured, meaning that I can only speculate? So it's important to be patient with survivors, go at their pace, allow room for space and silence. They may not be ready to talk about their experience, and so patience is important. To support them, you can simply be there for them so they have someone to talk to when they're ready. Make sure to validate their feelings and also make sure they know that it was not their fault. You can also connect them with community resources like DVSAS, where they can have confidential conversations with an advocate.
Okay, this next question is, what should I do if I see a sexual assault happening and there isn't anyone around to ask for help? Or what are some things you can do to prevent or stop sexual assault? So, as a bystander, you have the ability to intervene and stop or prevent a sexual assault. And it's really important that you first can ensure your own safety, and then you can decide how you want to intervene. So, maybe you want to intervene directly or indirectly. This might look like checking in with the person who needs help and asking questions like, are you okay? Do you need some help? Would you like me to stay with you? You could also create a distraction. So you might change the subject of the conversation or create a physical distraction, or you could call for help by calling 911 or another authority.
Okay, so the next question is, are we going to cover how to say no or what to do if you regret something? If someone asks you to do something you don't feel comfortable with or are ready for, you have every right to say no. Here are some steps for saying no. First, say no. Strongly say that you don't want to do that thing. Next, you can explain why. You shouldn't have to explain why in order for someone to respect your no, but it might help for them to understand your perspective. Next, you can suggest an alternative. You can suggest something else for the two of you to do. You can leave if you need or want to. If you do something that you regret, it can help to talk to someone about how you feel. You might want to talk to a friend or counselor. Remember that consent is reversible, so even if you did something once, that doesn't mean that you're given consent for it to happen again.
If someone states that they do not want to give consent, but they do want to participate in the activity, would further inquiry be okay? So consent is specific. Consent to one thing does not mean consent to the other. For example, if someone gives consent to a hug, this doesn't mean they've given consent to a kiss.
Someone asks, what if someone touches you and you're in a relationship? That's a really great question, and something that's important to keep in mind is that sexual assault can still occur within the context of a relationship. Well, remember that consent has to be specific, which could mean that consent to one thing doesn't mean consent to another, or in this case, consent previously doesn't mean consent in this particular moment. So just because a relationship has been established doesn't mean that someone has consented to being touched all the time. One of our anonymous questions asks, what occurs if both parties are under the influence and nobody can consent? And this is a really great question, and it can be a little confusing. But what I find is always really helpful is just to refer back to Fries. So if we think about the situation in the context of Fries, we might start to realize that if someone is under the influence, they might not be fully informed of what they're consenting to. So in this situation, it would probably just be best to wait until both people are sobered up. Also try to consider that someone might make decisions that they wouldn't usually when they're under the influence. And it can be harder to tell if somebody else is consenting when you yourself are under the influence. Also good reasons why it'd be best to wait.
Okay, this next question is, how should we deal with sexual assault cases where we don't know if the person is guilty? How should we react to those possible abusers, and how do we find out what happened without unnecessary judgment or canceling them? Or should we just judge those who are accused immediately? This is a really good and a really tough question. One thing I want us to think about is the fact that false accusations of sexual assault are extremely rare. It takes a lot of courage for someone to come forward and share their experience about sexual assault. Unfortunately, it is really common for survivors of sexual assault to feel ashamed, to worry that they won't be believed, or to feel like they will be blamed. In fact, 3 out of every 4 sexual assault cases are not reported to police. The best thing you can do for survivors is to believe them. That said, you still might want to hear the perpetrator's side of the story. As to the question of how to treat the perpetrator moving forward, I think a lot of people would have different opinions about the answer to this question. Some people might say that there is no space for forgiveness in this situation. Other people might think that there is space for forgiveness and accountability. And ultimately, it is up to you to decide how you want to interact with that person going forward. I would recommend to you to be mindful of the feelings of the survivor. And this is a really tough question. And if you are trying to figure out how you should go forward, I really encourage you to talk to an adult that you trust. Okay, this question is, several people I know have been victim blamed and not believed by the school administration. Is there anything we can do to raise discontent with this? So if this is something that happened to you or someone you know, you could connect with the district administration who was involved and raise your complaints. You could write them a letter, or you could organize a group and bring your complaints forward to the school principal, to the district Title IX coordinator who deals with sexual assault cases, or the school board if necessary. And you can also review the school district policies around Title IX on the school district website under their Policies and Procedures tab. You could also go to a website like stopsexualassaultinschools.org to read more about activism around stopping sexual assault in school.